Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. The world of Harry Potter is full of magic, but not all of it shines with light. Beyond the familiar, righteous magic lies another side. Dark magic, condemned, forbidden, and wrapped in mystery. Since Harry himself was always a light wizard, the topic of the dark arts remained only lightly touched upon in the books. But today, we'll look where even Potter himself wouldn't dare, into the heart of darkness. Enjoy watching. Number 1. What the dark arts really are. Dark arts aren't about summoning demons or playing with evil. The term refers to any kind of magic intended to harm another being, meaning any spell, if used with bad intent, can become dark. It's not the words that matter, but the heart of the wizard. Number 2, to make a spell work, you must truly desire to cause pain. Bellatrix Lestrange once said that to make an unforgivable curse work, a wizard must sincerely want to cause suffering. When Harry first tried to use Crucio against her, nothing happened. His soul held no hatred, but in the final battle, when he cursed Amicus Caro, his resolve was stronger, and the curse worked. The key to dark magic is desire. Number 3, ordinary objects can be turned dark. In the magical world, anything can become a weapon. Any object, a teapot, a necklace, or a book, can be cursed with dark enchantments to harm the innocent. The most horrifying example is, of course, the Horcruxes, where Voldemort hid fragments of his soul. They twisted minds, breeding hatred and fear, slowly destroying anyone who came near them. Number 4. Wounds inflicted by darkness never heal. Normally, a wave of a wand can mend almost any injury, but not those caused by darkness. Harry Potter's scar is the mark of Voldemort's curse. Dumbledore's hand, George's ear, Bill's cursed wounds, all of them are injuries that cannot be healed, for they carry the imprint of evil magic. Number 5. Not all wands can perform dark magic. A wand and its owner are bound more deeply than it seems. Some cause simply reject evil. For example, unicorn hair makes a wand too pure for dark spells. Ollivander once said such wands can fade if wielded by an evil wizard. Notably, Draco Malfoy's wand had this exact core. Perhaps that's why he never became a true servant of darkness. Number 6. Dark creatures, children of the darkness. Some magical beings are born of shadow itself. The basilisk was bred by a dark Parselmouth. Dementors, however, are born from human misery and despair. They are living embodiments of darkness, existing solely to feed on pain. Such creatures cannot be redeemed. They live only to consume emotion. Number 7. Dark magic is allowed to a point. In Britain, attitudes toward the dark arts are mixed. Yes, the unforgivable curses are banned, but many spells and artifacts exist in a grey zone. For instance, the shop Borgin & Burke's openly sells objects of dark origin. Some, like the Vanishing Cabinet, are neutral. Others, like the cursed necklace used against Katie Bell, are deadly. You can collect them, but using them is strictly forbidden. Number 8. Dark magic isn't always evil. Even darkness can serve good. Severus Snape killed Dumbledore to spare him pain. An act of dark magic done out of mercy. Harry used Imperius to sneak into Gringotts, a crime by law, but not in spirit. Sometimes darkness is just a tool. What matters is whose hand holds the wand. Number 9. There's a philosophy behind dark magic. Dark magic is more than a collection of cruel spells. It is a philosophy. Those who follow it believe that fear is strength and pain is power. Voldemort built his entire ideology on this belief. There is no good and evil, he once told Harry. There is only power and those too weak to seek it. To him, magic existed not to protect, but to dominate. His followers learned to see compassion as weakness, obedience as loyalty, and cruelty as proof of mastery. The dark arts, in their eyes, were a path to freedom, freedom from morality itself. Some of these practices were intellectual as much as magical. Legilimency, for instance, was not a curse in itself, yet it became a favoured tool among dark wizards. To invade another's mind was to conquer it. Snape, who mastered this art, once said, "The mind is not a book. It cannot be opened at will and examined at leisure." Yet in Voldemort's hands, legilimency became a weapon, stripping away secrets, breaking willpower, reshaping thought. The dark arts teach that control over others begins with control over the mind. To study them is to study the anatomy of power and the cost of wielding it. Number 10. Some spells cannot be learned from books. Some spells can't be found in books. They live in whispers, passed from one wizard to another like forbidden secrets. Even the restricted section of the Hogwarts library holds only fragments of them, hints, not instructions. Magic of that kind leaves traces, Dumbledore once said, and that's why such knowledge is hidden. To speak these curses aloud is to invite the darkness they were born from. Gellert Grindelwald was one of the few who mastered these unrecorded arts. He didn't learn them, he created them. His spells weren't written in Latin, but forged from emotion and intent. Witnesses in Europe spoke of enchantments that bound entire cities in silence, or made wizards forget their own names. Grindelwald's charm on the Elder Wand, for example, couldn't be undone through ordinary means. It recognized him, and him alone, as its master, bound by a kind of living pact no textbook could teach. Ancient blood magic was the same. Its rituals were never written down, only sealed within relics or runes. In the ruins of Eastern Europe, there are legends of families protected, or cursed, for generations by spells tied to their bloodline. These incantations were born from pain and sacrifice, not theory. That's why they can't be taught from a page. They must be felt, and once a wizard learns them, they are never forgotten, because they change the soul that speaks them. Number 11. Dark artifacts can have a will of their own. Some dark artifacts develop a will of their own. When an object is infused with powerful magic, especially dark magic, it begins to think, to desire, to choose. It's no longer just a tool, it becomes something alive. Never trust anything that can think for itself if you can't see where it keeps its brain. Arthur Weasley once warned. He wasn't joking. In the wizarding world, cursed objects don't just obey, they manipulate. The diary of Tom Riddle was one of these creations. To Ginny Weasley it seemed harmless, a blank book that listened. "He understood me," she once said, trembling after her rescue. But the diary didn't care for her pain. It fed on it. With every word she wrote, it drew her deeper, whispering promises, erasing her doubts. Soon it used her hands to open the Chamber of Secrets and unleash the basilisk. The diary wasn't merely preserving Riddle's memory, it was reviving him. When Harry stabbed it with the basilisk fang, the scream that followed wasn't paper burning. It was a fragment of a soul dying. That moment revealed the true danger of such artifacts. They don't just serve their creator, they are their creator. A cursed ring, a locket, a cup. Each Horcrux carried the echo of Voldemort's will, still searching for control, still whispering to the living. Destroying them was not just breaking objects, it was ending lives that refused to die. Number 12. Blood magic is one of the oldest dark arts. Blood magic is among the oldest and darkest forms of sorcery. It is power drawn from life itself, binding, sacred, and dangerous. In the wizarding world, blood carries more than magic. It carries lineage, protection, and destiny. That's why spells cast with it are irreversible. There is old magic, Dumbledore once said, magic deeper and older than any taught at Hogwarts. He was speaking of the kind born in sacrifice and in blood. Voldemort understood this too well. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, he used Harry's blood to regain his body. The blood of the enemy, forcibly taken. You will resurrect your foe, the spell demanded. Voldemort believed that by using Harry's blood protected by Lily's love, he would steal that very protection for himself. For a moment he did. The ritual worked. He rose from the cauldron reborn, pale and terrible, proof that blood magic could defy even death. But that same act became his undoing. By binding Harry's blood to his own body, Voldemort unknowingly shared Lily's ancient protection. When he tried to kill Harry years later, it backfired. His spell couldn't destroy what was now part of himself. In trying to conquer life through blood, he had tied his fate to the one he wanted dead. The old magic had claimed its price. Throughout wizarding history, blood has been used to seal oaths, protect families, or curse enemies. Ancient texts speak of rituals where a single drop could forge or destroy entire bonds, but every act of blood magic stains the soul. It demands payment in pain or life. That's why even the bravest wizards fear it, because once blood is spilled in the name of power, the magic never truly lets go. Number 13. Darkness preys on the broken and hurt. Darkness preys on the broken. It whispers to those who've suffered too much, promising power where once there was pain. Anger, grief, and loneliness make the perfect soil for dark magic to grow. The world isn't fair, it says, but I can make it yours. That's how Tom Riddle began. A lonely boy in an orphanage, abandoned and unloved. His bitterness became his strength, and his strength became his curse. When Dumbledore first met him, the young Tom already enjoyed causing pain. I can make bad things happen to people who annoy me, he said calmly. It wasn't yet dark magic, but the seed was there, a need to control what once hurt him. Over time, that need became addiction. He surrounded himself with followers who shared that same emptiness. People like Bellatrix Lestrange and Severus Snape, both driven by wounds they couldn't heal. Bellatrix was consumed by her devotion to Voldemort. She found purpose in cruelty because it filled the void inside her. Snape, on the other hand, sought redemption through darkness, using it as armor for his broken heart. Both began as victims of rejection, of loss, but pain made them easy prey. Voldemort didn't need to force them. He only needed to offer belonging. Sirius Black once said, "We've all got both light and dark inside us. What matters is the part we choose to act on." The tragedy of those who turn to the dark arts is that they believe darkness will make them whole. But it never does. It only feeds on the cracks in the soul until the person disappears, leaving only the pain that started it all. Number 14. There is a price to learning dark magic. Learning dark magic always comes with a price. It's not just knowledge, it's surrender. Every spell demands a part of the wizard's soul. The more one uses it, the more it takes. Magic always leaves traces, Dumbledore once told Harry. He meant that every act of darkness leaves a scar, not on the body, but on the mind. The deeper you go, the harder it becomes to return. No one proves this better than Lord Voldemort. In his obsession with immortality, he split his soul into 7 pieces, creating Horcruxes. Each ritual tore away his humanity. By the time he returned, he was no longer a man but a shadow, pale, noseless, and cold. Ruling describes him as less than alive but more than dead. He gained power beyond measure but lost the ability to love, to feel, to be human. His transformation was not a punishment from others. It was the natural consequence of the path he chose. Even lesser curses take their toll. The Cruciatus and Imperius spells don't just break the victim, they change the caster. Bellatrix Lestrange used them so often that cruelty became her joy. She no longer distinguished pain from pleasure. To her, torture was an art. "You have to mean it, Potter," she taunted, laughing as she spoke. That line revealed everything. Dark magic reshapes reality itself, bending it around the will of the one who dares to use it. Practicing such magic means losing something precious. Empathy, clarity, the sense of right and wrong. It starts as curiosity, a desire to understand forbidden power, but it ends with emptiness. The dark arts promise strength, yet they demand a soul in return. Voldemort paid the ultimate price, and his story is the warning left for all who think they can touch darkness and remain unchanged. Number 15. Dark magic is hard to control. Dark magic is a force that resists control. Even the most skilled wizards admit that once you step into its realm, it begins to consume you. It doesn't obey logic. It feeds on emotion. Fear, rage, or despair can twist a spell beyond recognition. What starts as power soon turns into chaos. Once you've crossed that line, Severus Snape once warned, it marks you forever. Few truly understand how dangerous that warning was. The best example is Vincent Crabbe's fatal mistake in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Cornered in the room of requirement, desperate and terrified, he cast Fiendfire, a curse of living fire so powerful that even Voldemort avoided it. Rowling describes it as a roaring mass of enchanted flames that took the shape of monstrous beasts. Crabbe thought he could use it to destroy Harry and his friends, but the flames turned against him. The Inferno devoured everything: gold, walls, furniture, and finally Crabbe himself. His classmates screamed as the room transformed into a fiery sea of serpents and dragons, twisting and biting in the air. Harry barely escaped on a broomstick, clutching the Horcrux that the cursed fire had destroyed. Crabbe, however, was gone, consumed by the very weapon he tried to command. That moment showed the true nature of dark magic. It gives power, but demands submission. It thrives on emotion, but punishes weakness. When a wizard loses control, the darkness doesn't hesitate. It turns back on its master, as it did with Crabbe, proving that no one, not even the boldest, can truly tame the fire once it begins to burn. Number 16. Some ancient rituals are still forbidden. It is often said that the dark arts are not merely spells but temptations, doors that, once opened, refuse to close. Throughout wizarding history, countless witches and wizards have tried to control what should never be controlled: life, death, and destiny itself. The Ministry of Magic, through centuries of bloodshed and corruption, learned that some doors are better left sealed. Yet even today, rumors persist of forbidden chambers deep beneath the Ministry, where the air hums with ancient power and dust covers the remnants of rituals that once threatened the very balance between life and the void. The Department of Mysteries, often whispered about but rarely understood, became the final resting place for such knowledge. Among its many sealed rooms lies one containing the ritual of the mirror, a spell so dangerous that even uttering its incantation aloud is considered a crime under the 1729 Regulation of Dark Practices. The ritual was said to have originated from the era of Morgana Le Fay, whose followers sought to pierce the veil between present and future. Unlike divination, which offers fragmented visions, this ritual promised absolute clarity. The exact moment of one's death reflected back through an enchanted mirror, but the price was terrible. Wizards who dared to look often lost their sanity, trapped in the looping reflection of their own demise. Records indicate that the last known attempt to perform the ritual of the mirror occurred in 1836 by a scholar named Ignatius Peveril, distant kin to the family associated with the Deathly Hallows. Peveril, obsessed with overcoming mortality, stole an artifact known as the Silver Obsidian, a mirror capable of channeling prophetic energy. His notes, later confiscated by the Aura Office, describe how the mirror whispered in the voices of the dead and showed the reflection not of time but of judgment. When he finally activated the ritual, he vanished entirely, leaving only a scorched floor and the faint scent of burning sage. The mirror was retrieved and sealed within the ministry's archives, warded by the unbreakable hex. To this day, no one knows if Ignatius Peveril died, transcended, or became part of the mirror itself. Even more sinister is the Circle of Repentance, a ritual that offers redemption through sacrifice. Its existence was first recorded in the 12th century in the Black family's private grimoires. The spell allows one to exchange another's life for one's own, a perversion of natural magic so extreme that even the darkest wizards considered it abhorrent. The circle must be drawn with blood and salt beneath the moon of Samhain, and within its centre stands the petitioner, one who seeks to escape fate. To give death for life is to borrow from the debt of the abyss, an anonymous scribe wrote in an early manuscript preserved at Hogwarts' restricted section. The ministry has long since classified the Circle of Repentance as Cursed Level Omega, forbidden even for academic study. There are, however, stories of those who defied the ban. One such case is the tragedy of Cassandra Molepepper, a talented witch from the 16th century, known for her pioneering work in magical healing. When her only son fell victim to the Grey Plague, Molepepper is said to have turned to the forbidden texts of Salazar Slytherin himself. In desperation, she drew the circle beneath her home and invoked the ancient words of exchange. Her son awoke the next morning, healthy, alive, but she was found in the same room, lifeless, her body turned to stone. The circle burned into the floorboards, impossible to erase. The ministry destroyed her home and banned all research into ritual transference. Her story remains a grim lesson in the price of forbidden mercy. Such rituals represent the extreme edge of magical exploration, where morality and power collide. Even in modern times, the ministry faces controversies surrounding the use of partial resurrection spells, techniques that border on necromancy. While the draft of living death or the inferious enchantments are well documented, the ancient soul extraction rites are almost mythic. The idea that one could remove, contain, or manipulate a human soul is older than the Hogwarts founders themselves. The practice was first outlawed after the so-called Harrowing of Avalon, when the wizard Alaric Crow attempted to create a vessel capable of holding multiple souls. His experiment, according to recovered accounts, ended with screams that echoed across the countryside for days. Even Lord Voldemort's Horcruxes, perhaps the most infamous form of soul division, were only a shadow of the older rituals. The Horcrux is, in truth, a simplified echo of the ancient rite of the divided shadow, a ceremony practiced by the cult of Tenebrae in the 10th century. That group believed the soul could be stretched like fabric and anchored in multiple vessels. But unlike Voldemort, who tore his soul through murder, the Tenebrae performed collective sacrifices, entire families offering their lives to preserve a single magus. The last surviving scrolls of that cult were seized by the ministry during the reign of Minister Damocles' Roll and locked in the Department of Mysteries, where the label reads simply, "Property of the Unspeakables, do not touch." Number 17. Even Muggles have used dark power. The history of the dark arts is often told as a story confined to the wizarding world, to those who wield wands and channel power through spells and potions. Yet whispers persist, murmurs from the edges of both magical and Muggle history, suggesting that the shadow of the dark arts has, at times, fallen upon those who possess no magic at all. It is a disturbing thought, one that the Ministry of Magic has always been reluctant to acknowledge. But truth, like magic itself, cannot always be contained by walls of secrecy or disbelief. Some Muggles, it seems, have brushed against the same darkness that once consumed the most dangerous wizards in history. Long before Voldemort rose to power, before even Grindelwald dreamed of domination, there were Muggle men and women who sought forbidden knowledge. They could not wield spells, yet they felt the same hunger for power and immortality that drives all who tread the path of the dark arts. Some found their way into possession of enchanted artifacts, relics that responded not to the blood of the wizard, but to the desperation of the human soul. Such artifacts were sometimes created by dark wizards seeking to extend their influence beyond the boundaries of the magical world, tools through which they could control or corrupt unsuspecting Muggles. It is said that magic, once created, never truly dies. It waits for a willing hand. The 17th century bore witness to one such case, that of Sir Nicholas Grimble, a Muggle scholar and collector of rare antiquities, whose life became entwined with the legacy of Lord Voldemort centuries before the Dark Lord's birth. Records of Grimble's existence are sparse, but fragments survive in both Wizarding and Muggle archives. The Daily Prophet once referred to him as the man who touched what should not be touched. According to the account preserved in the restricted section of the Hogwarts library, Sir Nicholas came into possession of an ornate ring engraved with a serpent, an heirloom believed to have belonged to the Gaunt family, Voldemort's ancestors. The ring, it was said, contained a curse so powerful that it transcended the limits of time. No one knows how the ring resurfaced in the 1600s, long before it was later destroyed by Albus Dumbledore in 1997. Some historians suggest that the artifact itself may have existed in multiple enchanted forms, created through dark alchemy, copies of the original, bound to fragments of memory rather than soul. What is certain is that Grimble's obsession began shortly after the ring came into his possession. His journals, preserved in the British Museum's restricted vaults, describe a voice in the shadows that whispered secrets of immortality and revenge. Though he was a man of reason and science, Grimble began to perform strange rituals in the dead of night, surrounding himself with symbols and runes that had no place in the ordinary world. "Magic leaves traces," Professor Dumbledore once said in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince. "Sometimes those traces find their way where they should not." Grimble, it appears, was one such victim of that lingering residue. The ring did not grant him magic, but it opened his mind to visions and horrors he could not comprehend. Servants claimed to see him converse with unseen presences, and guests at his estate reported hearing screams echoing through the corridors at midnight. His final writings, smudged with ink and blood, speak of a serpent with no flesh, a master of shadows, and of his own reflection moving when he stood still. For the wizarding historians who have examined these events, the conclusion is unsettling. How could a mere Muggle be influenced so profoundly by a magical object? The answer lies perhaps in the nature of dark enchantments themselves. The dark arts feed on emotion, fear, anger, desire, and these are not confined to wizards. Even without a wand, a human heart can serve as a vessel for corruption. Just as Tom Riddle split his soul through acts of murder, so too can a muggle open a door to darkness through greed or despair. Grimbell's tragedy stands as a reminder that magic's essence is not confined to spellcraft, but to intention. One curious footnote in this story was discovered centuries later during the investigation of Horcruxes by Dumbledore and Harry Potter. While the true Horcrux ring was found in the ruins of the Gaunt Shack, the records of the Department of Mysteries revealed the existence of an earlier copy, a prototype, as one unspeakable called it. The resemblance to the Grimbell ring was undeniable. Could it be that Voldemort's ancestors, dabbling in the dark magic of their time, had already experimented with creating cursed vessels? If so, Grimbell's discovery may have awakened the echo of a darkness that never truly died. In his folly, he might have reawakened what was meant to remain buried. As the story unfolds, Grimbell's descent mirrors in haunting ways the path of Tom Riddle himself. He began as a man of intellect, drawn not by malice but by curiosity. Yet curiosity in the realm of forbidden magic is often the first step toward ruin. Witnesses recorded that after months of isolation, Grimbell's eyes grew unnaturally pale, and he ceased eating altogether. He spoke of voices from the void, of promises that the ring would open the veil between life and death. When his estate was finally entered by the authorities, they found his study sealed from within. Upon the desk lay his skeletal remains, and on his finger the serpent ring, gleaming with an inner light. The Ministry of Magic's Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes tried to suppress the story, fearing panic among the wizarding population. But rumours persisted. One Auror, who later resigned, wrote in his private notes that the ring had fed on Grimbell's life, consuming his essence as it sought to regain power. The body was cremated under ministry supervision, yet the ashes reportedly emitted a faint hiss as they were scattered, a detail that no official record confirms but none deny. To this day, the Grimbell ring remains unaccounted for. Number 18. Dark magic can corrupt magical space. There are few subjects in the wizarding world that inspire such quiet unease as the dark art. Beyond their cruelty and their moral corruption, some scholars whisper of a deeper, stranger danger. That dark magic does not merely wound or kill, but alters the very essence of magic itself. It is said that wherever the dark arts are practiced for long enough, the natural balance of magic begins to warp. Spells misfire without reason, charms decay into chaos, and the once living pulse of enchantment grows cold and hollow. What was once a tool of harmony becomes a force of distortion, like a melody that has been played so often and so violently that its notes are no longer pure. One of the most striking examples of this phenomenon was discovered in the abandoned Gaunt Shack, hidden deep in the Wiltshire countryside. The place had once belonged to the ancestors of Lord Voldemort, the last pure-blood remnants of the ancient line of Salazar Slytherin. By the time the house was rediscovered, it had fallen into such decay that the air itself seemed to hum with tension. Aurors who entered it reported a faint ringing in their ears, a metallic taste in the mouth, and a heavy sense of pressure that grew stronger the longer they stayed. It was as though the magic in the air was resisting them, as though it recognized them as intruders. When a team from the Department of Mysteries later investigated, they found something even more troubling. Enchantments cast within the Gaunt property refused to behave predictably. Lumos spells sputtered into smoke, and Protego shields appeared and dissolved at random intervals. It was determined that this instability was not due to environmental factors, but to a deep, magical contamination left behind by one of Voldemort's Horcruxes, the ring that had once contained a fragment of his soul. It was in that house that Albus Dumbledore had found the cursed relic, and it was there, too, that he had sustained the blackened wound upon his hand. The magic of the place had not healed, even years after the ring was destroyed. Dumbledore himself hinted at this strange corruption in his conversations with Harry Potter. "Voldemort's soul is beyond repair," he once said. "When you divide it, you maim it, and when you maim it, the damage echoes." That echo, many now believe, is not limited to the soul alone, but extends outward into the fabric of the world. Just as a forest poisoned by dark alchemy might take centuries to recover, so too does magic, remember, the touch of evil. The gaunt shack became a wound upon the magical landscape, a silent reminder that dark spells do not simply fade when their caster is gone. Researchers in the Department of Mysteries have since begun to treat magic as a kind of living system, what one unspeakable called the ecology of enchantment. In this theory, spells, wards, and magical energy flow through the world much like air currents or ocean tides. When dark magic is used excessively, it functions like a pollutant, corrupting that flow. The result is an area of magical imbalance, what some fieldworkers call dead magic zones. In such places, even ordinary charms like Reparo or Alohomora can behave erratically, as if the natural language of magic has been scrambled. This theory may help explain other historical anomalies. Centuries ago, in the ruins of Borgin Moor, a site once used for necromantic rituals by the followers of Herpo the Foul, wand-makers reported that the wood from nearby trees could not hold enchantments. Wands carved from that forest snapped more easily, and cores inserted into them lost potency within months. Ollivander's great-grandfather recorded the phenomenon with alarm, writing that the trees themselves seemed weary of magic, as though they had forgotten what light felt like. Modern scholars have drawn parallels between that ancient site and the Gaunt home, suggesting that both had been permanently altered by prolonged exposure to dark forces. It is important to note that this distortion does not always manifest as obvious decay. Sometimes the effects are subtler. An enchantment that twists itself into something unintended, a potion that resists brewing despite perfect technique. Professor Horace Slughorn once described how certain ingredients refused to behave in his cauldron after he had handled a cursed locket belonging to Voldemort. "It was as if the air around me was poisoned," he confessed in private years later. "Nothing I brewed came out quite right for weeks." He dismissed it as imagination at the time, but it is now believed to be another symptom of dark magical contamination. The magical instability surrounding Horcruxes appears to be particularly severe. These objects, created through murder and soul division, act as anchors that bind fractured magic to the physical world. Hermione Granger, during her later studies at the Department of Mysteries, wrote that Horcruxes are not merely containers, but emitters of damaged magic, radiating the kind of energy that seeks to preserve itself by corrupting everything around it. That observation may explain why places tied to Voldemort's Horcruxes, be it the cave where he hid the locket, the gaunt shack with the ring, or the room of requirement that held the diadem, seemed to repel natural magic. The very walls pulsed with dread. In the case of the cave, survivors of the final battle recount how even Dumbledore's most powerful spells struggled against the place. The Inferi within the underground lake were not merely animated corpses, they were extensions of the tainted magic that saturated the chamber. When Dumbledore conjured fire to repel them, the flames flickered unnaturally, as though the darkness itself was swallowing the light. The air was thick with evil, Harry later remembered. It was like being trapped inside someone else's nightmare. What he experienced was not just fear, but a kind of magical suffocation. The environment itself had turned against them. Number 19. Fear makes dark magic stronger. Fear has always been the invisible thread woven through the history of dark magic. It is not merely an emotion, it is the lifeblood that gives the dark arts their terrible potency. Every curse, every hex, every whisper of forbidden power grows heavier when fear hangs in the air. Those who have studied the arcane depths of magic, from the time of Herpo the Foul to the rise of Lord Voldemort, have known that the human heart is the greatest reservoir of energy, and that terror, more than rage or hatred, provides the purest form of fuel. When a wizard succumbs to fear, their magic trembles. The incantations waver, and control slips like water through shaking hands. But for those who have learned to harness that fear, to let it flow instead of resisting it, power grows exponentially. Voldemort himself once said that fear was his most faithful servant. The irony, of course, was that he inspired the very emotion he depended upon. Wherever he walked, shadows thickened, and the air itself seemed to hum with restrained violence. His presence was not only a symbol of terror, it was the mechanism by which his dark magic expanded. Dementors provide perhaps the clearest natural example of this phenomenon. These soul-sucking creatures are not evil in the moral sense. They are manifestations of despair, drawn to pain as moths to light. When Harry Potter first encountered them on the Hogwarts Express, he felt his mind crumble beneath the weight of hopelessness. "I felt as if I'd never be cheerful again," he later admitted. This is precisely how the Dementors grow stronger. Their power multiplies in the presence of suffering. During the Second Wizarding War, when the Ministry of Magic fell under Voldemort's control, the widespread fear of citizens created the perfect feeding ground for Dementors. Villages once filled with laughter turned silent, and even the Patronus charm, a spell fueled by positive emotion, faltered more easily in that climate of dread. Voldemort understood this principle instinctively. He was no mere spellcaster, he was a manipulator of collective emotion. By spreading fear across the wizarding world, he effectively amplified the reach of his dark power. The massacre at Godric's Hollow, the public tortures, the random disappearances, all were designed to create an atmosphere of panic, so pervasive that even the most skilled aurors felt their wands weaken in their grip. The dark mark in the sky was not only a warning, it was an enchantment in itself, a beacon that summoned dread and strengthened the connection between Voldemort and his followers, each terrified. Glance toward that green skull was another pulse of energy sent into the veins of the Dark Lord's dominion. Bellatrix Lestrange was another master of this dynamic. Her cruelty was not aimless, it was ritualistic. She drew ecstasy from the terror of her victims because that emotion sharpened her spells to a terrifying edge. When she tortured Hermione Granger in the Malfoy manner, her laughter was not madness, it was intoxication. The pain and fear in Hermione's voice amplified Bellatrix's Cruciatus curse, making it almost unbearable. It is said that true mastery of the Cruciatus requires not only hatred, but a connection to the victim's terror. Fear completes the circuit, fusing the will of the caster with the agony of the target, until both are locked in a dreadful exchange of energy. Even curses that seem purely mechanical, like the Imperious Curse, feed subtly on fear. Control through domination requires the victim's submission, and that submission often comes through panic. The moment of surrender, when the victim's will collapses, is when the spell truly takes hold. Voldemort's regime thrived on this psychological surrender. Entire families obeyed him not because of loyalty, but because the terror of disobedience weighed heavier than conscience. Fear became not only an emotion, but a political weapon, a dark form of governance that kept the entire wizarding world under his invisible spell. The connection between fear and dark magic was not lost on Albus Dumbledore. In one of his most profound statements, he said, "Fear of a name increases fear of the thing itself." This was not mere philosophy, it was a defense against dark magic. By refusing to speak Voldemort's name, wizards unknowingly contributed to his mythic power. The silence itself became an incantation, echoing his control over their hearts. Only those brave enough to pronounce Voldemort weakened his grip, for they resisted the emotional current that fueled his dominion. In essence, courage disrupted the spell of collective dread. Horcruxes, too, are intertwined with the energy of fear. The act of creating one requires murder, a moment of ultimate terror for the victim, and complete moral decay for the perpetrator. The fragment of soul sealed within the object is preserved not only through dark enchantment, but through the emotional residue of the killing act. The memory of fear remains embedded in the Horcrux, making it repellent, even poisonous. When Harry approached Tom Riddle's diary, he felt an unnatural chill and an eerie pull. It was not only the magic within, but the fear trapped in its pages, forever echoing the moment of its creation. Fear's influence extends even to defensive magic. When Harry learned to conjure a Patronus, he realized that the spell's strength was directly opposed to the presence of fear. "You're not weakening your Patronus," said Lupin once. "You're letting the fear win." This opposition defines the moral polarity of magic itself. Light and dark are not opposing forces of different nature, they are emotions directed differently. Joy repels Dementors because it nullifies their food source. Love shields against curses because it dismantles fear's foundation. In this sense, dark magic is not inherently external, it grows where courage falters. One of the most haunting moments that illustrates the feeding of dark magic through fear occurred during the Battle of Hogwarts. As Voldemort's voice echoed through the night, offering mercy in exchange for surrender, the defenders' spirits wavered. "You have fought valiantly," he said, "but you have allowed your friends to die for you rather than face me." Each trembling hand, each tear shed in hopelessness, lent strength to the darkness gathering beyond the walls. Yet when Neville Longbottom stood up, trembling but unbroken, and defied him, something remarkable happened. The air seemed to shift. That act of courage disrupted the pulse of collective fear. In that instant, Voldemort's magic lost its perfect resonance. The Death Eaters themselves were addicted to this cycle. Their masks were not only tools of anonymity, but amplifiers of terror. When they appeared in white skull masks, they were no longer individuals. They became embodiments of fear. The magic they cast together was more potent because of the synchronized panic they created. The same curse, cast in silence, would have been weaker. United by the fear they inspired, they drew from the same emotional reservoir, a perverse kind of shared energy that magnified every curse. Yet fear is a double-edged sword. The same emotion that fuels dark magic can also destroy its wielder. Voldemort's downfall began not through power, but through his own deepest terror, his fear of death. In attempting to conquer it, he fragmented his soul and weakened the humanity that anchored his strength. Fear consumed him from within, corrupting his magic into something brittle and unstable. When Harry faced him without hatred, only pity, Voldemort's spells faltered. His magic had nowhere to draw energy from, for pity generates no fear. The circle closed, and the very force that once empowered him became his undoing. Even after Voldemort's death, traces of this principle linger in the world. Forbidden artifacts, cursed objects, and haunted places still carry echoes of the fear that forged them. The cursed necklace that nearly killed Katie Bell radiated not only danger, but dread. Whoever touched it felt their heart tighten as if the object remembered the suffering it was designed to cause. In this way, fear becomes immortal, bound into the very structure of dark enchantments, echoing long after their creators are gone. Scholars of the Department of Mysteries have theorized that fear itself might be a magical frequency, an emotional vibration that resonates through human consciousness and can be harnessed, distorted, or magnified. This would explain why some spells require emotional triggers. The killing curse, for example, demands pure, unadulterated intent, yet behind that intent often lies fear, fear of loss, of weakness, of mortality. To channel it fully, a wizard must surrender to it completely, and once surrendered, they rarely return unchanged. Harry Potter's journey, in many ways, was a study in reversing this principle. His victory was not in overpowering dark magic, but in denying it nourishment. By facing fear rather than fleeing from it, he starved the darkness of its sustenance. When he walked willingly into the forbidden forest to meet death, he performed the ultimate counterspell, not a charm or curse, but an act of acceptance. Fear dissolved and the Dark Lord's power crumbled. It was the purest expression of Dumbledore's teaching that love and courage, once chosen over fear, can unmake even the deepest darkness. Thus, the truth about the dark arts is neither simple nor confined to spells. It is a reflection of the human condition. Every shadow it casts is born from a trembling heart, every curse whispered from the lips of someone who once feared too much. Fear strengthens darkness, but only because it weakens the light within us. And in the wizarding world, as in our own, the greatest act of magic will always be the courage to stand unafraid. Number 20. Defending against dark magic requires inner strength. The art of defending against the dark arts is not a mere subject in the Hogwarts curriculum. It is a lifelong discipline, a moral test, and a mirror reflecting the strength of one's soul. From the first lessons taught by Professor Quirrell to the practical combat training under Mad-Eye Moody, every moment spent learning how to resist darkness reveals one undeniable truth. The battle against evil demands more than a wand and a spell. It demands inner light. Even among the most gifted wizards, few possess the balance of knowledge, courage, and purity of heart necessary to face true darkness without being consumed by it. When Harry Potter first encountered the dark arts in his first year, he did not yet understand what it meant to resist them. Facing Professor Quirrell, who carried Lord Voldemort's parasitic presence, was not just a duel between a student and a teacher. It was the first confrontation between innocence and corruption. Harry's defense in that moment did not come from a charm or a curse, but from something entirely different, the innate purity of his soul. It was his refusal to surrender, the love his mother had left within him, that destroyed Quirrell when all other magic failed. Dumbledore later explained, "Your mother's sacrifice made the bond of love your greatest protection." That invisible shield, rooted not in spell work, but in moral strength, revealed the essence of true defense against darkness. As years went by, the lessons in defense against the dark arts changed with every new professor, yet one theme remained constant. Knowledge alone is never enough. Gilderoy Lockhart, who filled his office with portraits of himself, believed in glamour and reputation rather than skill. His inability to perform even a basic countercurse in the Chamber of Secrets showed that self-admiration is a form of blindness that the dark arts easily exploit. In contrast, Remus Lupin, perhaps the most gifted teacher of the subject, showed Harry and his classmates that darkness must be met with understanding, not fear. When Lupin taught the Patronus charm to Harry, he explained that it was not about power, but memory. You need to think of a memory that is so happy you could live in it. This idea alone transformed the notion of magical defense into something deeply human. The Patronus charm is, in many ways, the purest expression of resistance to evil. It does not rely on aggression, but on illumination. The silvery figure that bursts from the wand is not merely a shield, it is a manifestation of the caster's strongest, most positive emotion. Yet very few wizards are capable of conjuring a corporeal Patronus. Even experienced witches and wizards fail when fear or doubt cloud their mind. Harry's success in summoning his stag, especially at such a young age, was not because he was exceptionally powerful in magic, but because his heart still held the warmth of love and friendship untainted by cynicism. In contrast, Dolores Umbridge, though high-ranking and supposedly well-trained, could never summon one. The darkness within her was stronger than any light she could call upon. Defending against the dark arts also means resisting its seductive nature. Many spells born of darkness do not attack the body but the will. The Imperious Curse, for instance, strips away autonomy, turning a victim into a puppet. The true defense against it, as demonstrated by Harry during Mad-Eye Moody's lessons, is an act of pure defiance. Moody had cast the Imperious Curse on each student, and all obeyed his commands, except Harry, who fought back with an instinctive refusal. "You're resisting it, that's good, Potter," Moody had exclaimed. But beneath those words lay a deeper truth. Only those who value freedom, who possess a strong sense of self, can repel control. This kind of strength cannot be taught from a textbook. It must be forged in the soul. The psychological toll of confronting darkness is another hidden lesson often ignored by young students. Dark creatures like boggarts and dementors do not simply frighten, they expose inner weaknesses. A boggart becomes the shape of one's worst fear, forcing the wizard to laugh at what terrifies them most. A dementor, however, does not attack the body. It devours hope. When Harry fainted during his first encounter with a dementor on the Hogwarts Express, he felt cold all over, as though happiness had been sucked from him. It was not weakness, it was sensitivity. Those who feel deeply are the most vulnerable to despair, yet that same sensitivity becomes their weapon once they learn to control it. When Harry mastered the Patronus, it was not through brute strength, but through emotional resilience, the decision to remember joy even when everything felt lost. Albus Dumbledore himself once said, "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." Nowhere does this principle shine brighter than in the art of defending against darkness. Knowledge of curses, hexes, and counterspells might make one skilled, but without moral clarity, even the most talented wizard risks becoming what they fight. Severus Snape was perhaps the most complex embodiment of this struggle. A master of both dark arts and defense against them, he stood forever between two worlds, light and shadow. When he conjured a Patronus identical to Lily Potter's doe, it revealed a truth that transcended his past sins. Love, even buried under guilt and bitterness, remained his most powerful defense. That moment, silent and haunting, proved that redemption itself is a form of resistance. In the darker corners of magical history, there are countless examples of those who underestimated the power of inner strength. The Death Eaters, though skilled and disciplined, were ultimately slaves to fear and ambition. Bellatrix Lestrange, whose cruelty was unmatched, demonstrated how obsession with power corrodes the soul until no light remains. Her downfall came not from a stronger curse, but from the combined courage of those who fought for love and justice. In the Battle of Hogwarts, Molly Weasley's victory over Bellatrix was not a matter of skill. It was the fury of a mother defending her child. That kind of strength cannot be learned in a classroom. It is born of pure, unshakable love, the same essence that shielded Harry as a baby. Defense against the dark arts also teaches humility. Each professor who held the position faced a different kind of darkness, external or internal. Quirrell succumbed to fear, Lockhart to vanity, Lupin to his own curse, Moody to impersonation, Umbridge to tyranny, and Snape to guilt. Yet each lesson they gave, whether intentionally or not, revealed the same moral foundation. Darkness can take many forms, and the greatest defense is knowing one's own weakness. The subject, cursed as it was, served as a reflection of the eternal struggle between light and shadow in every human heart. Among all defensive spells, none are as demanding as the Patronus charm. Its complexity is not in the wand movement or incantation, expecto patronum, but in the emotional purity required to sustain it. When Harry practiced it with Lupin, he failed repeatedly until he found the right memory. "I'm trying," he had said, frustrated. "It's not strong enough." Lupin had encouraged him to choose a memory of his parents, alive and loving. That memory gave the light its shape. This lesson extends beyond the spell itself. Darkness feeds on emptiness, and light is sustained by remembrance. To defend oneself, one must carry within a memory strong enough to outshine despair. Another crucial element of true defense lies in empathy. Dumbledore understood this better than anyone. He often warned his students that power without compassion leads to ruin. When he spoke of Tom Riddle, he said, "He never loved, nor has he ever been loved." This was not merely a moral observation, but a magical truth. Love, the greatest magic, is both shield and weapon. Those who cultivate it cannot be easily dominated by darkness. It is why Voldemort, despite his immense power, was incapable of producing a Patronus. There was nothing within him but emptiness. His fear of death, his inability to feel affection, and his obsession with control made him vulnerable in ways he could never comprehend. The practice of defending against the dark arts, then, becomes an inward journey. It asks the wizard not only to master spells, but to confront personal shadows. Each curse faced, each fear overcome, strengthens the will. When Harry taught Dumbledore's army, he passed on not just technique, but faith. He reminded his peers that bravery is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to stand anyway. His teaching method reflected everything he had learned from Lupin and Dumbledore, that unity, trust, and moral conviction are the true bulwarks against corruption. Even the most brilliant wizards, like Alastor Moody, understood that constant vigilance was essential. His famous phrase, "constant vigilance," became both a warning and a philosophy. Evil, he believed, hides not just in dark corners, but in complacency. Those who think themselves immune to corruption are already vulnerable. The true art of defense is awareness of oneself, of others, and of the subtle ways darkness seeps into thought and intention. That is why Moody's training was so relentless. He was preparing his students, not just for battle, but for endurance. Ultimately, the struggle against the dark arts is not a war of wands, but of hearts. It is the eternal tension between hope and despair, between selfishness and love. To master defense is to master one's self. The spells, Ridiculous, Expelliarmus, Expecto Patronum, are but instruments. The true weapon lies within the wizard's spirit. The story of Harry Potter proves this again and again. The greatest victories are not won by force, but by faith in the light that survives even the darkest night. And in that light, every spell, every act of courage becomes more than magic. It becomes salvation. Number 21, dark spells can infect the wizard. The study of the dark arts within the wizarding world has always carried with it a sense of danger, not only for those who suffer under their effects, but also for those who dare to wield them. It is a branch of magic that demands more than mere skill. It demands submission. There is a reason why Dumbledore once warned that it is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are far more than our abilities. Every dark incantation uttered, every curse cast leaves a trace, a kind of magical residue that seeps into the wizard's aura, staining it like ink spreading through water. It is not a myth or an exaggeration born from superstition. Throughout magical history, those who have dabbled in the dark arts too deeply have shown clear signs of corruption, both physical and mental. The darkness they wield begins to feed on them, whispering temptations, reshaping not only their magic, but their very identity. Take the case of Professor Quirinus Quirrell, one of the most striking and tragic examples of such corruption. When he first joined Hogwarts as a teacher, Quirrell was a timid, nervous man, more interested in books than in bravery. He had a fascination with what he called practical experience, which led him to seek out creatures and wizards associated with the dark arts. It was during this time that he encountered Lord Voldemort. At first, he believed he could outsmart the Dark Lord, imagining himself as the scholar who could control darkness rather than be controlled by it. But the truth was far crueler. The longer Quirrell remained in Voldemort's presence, the more his will began to erode. His thoughts became clouded, his voice changed, and a strange, icy presence began to dwell in his mind. He was weak, Voldemort would later sneer, too weak to resist me. In the end, Quirrell became more than a servant. He became a vessel. Dark magic does not always announce its corruption with scars or visible deformities. Sometimes the changes are subtle, creeping in like a slow infection. Wizards who frequently use curses such as the Cruciatus or Imperius often report a dulling of empathy. Their laughter becomes hollow, their eyes colder. It is as though the emotion that once made them human has been drained away by the very spells they cast. The Aura Department has long observed that ex-Death Eaters display a peculiar aura detectable by trained legilimens, a kind of pulsating shadow in their magical signature. It is said to be a byproduct of dark magic feeding off their own life force, leaving behind echoes of pain and cruelty. The more they kill, the deeper the shadow grows. This effect is not confined to wizards of Voldemort's circle. Even talented, well-intentioned witches have felt the taint of dark magic. One might recall the case of Isolde Sayre, a distant descendant of Salazar Slytherin. Historical records describe her as a gifted young witch, fiercely independent, who once attempted to master a forbidden charm meant to reflect death itself. The spell, ancient and incomplete, demanded more than wand work. It required a surrender of the soul. Isolde survived, but not unchanged. Her hair turned white, her reflection wavered in mirrors, and she confessed in her journals that she could hear voices in the silence. Though she later fled to America and founded Ilvermorny, the remnants of that early experiment haunted her until her death. Dark magic leaves fingerprints that never fade. What makes these spells so dangerous is that they are powered not merely by magical energy, but by intent. The unforgivable curses, Avada Kedavra, Crucio, and Imperio, require a state of mind steeped in cruelty, dominance, or pure will to destroy. That intent is what corrupts. When Bellatrix Lestrange tortured Alice and Frank Longbottom, she did not merely harm their bodies. She poured her own hatred into the spell, binding a part of her essence to that act of pain. It is why, even years later, her eyes burned with a feverish madness. The curse had not only hurt her victims, it had reshaped her soul into something wild and irreversible. To channel such energy repeatedly is to carve darkness into one's spirit, a self-inflicted wound that never closes. The transformation is often gradual. First comes the thrill, the intoxicating rush of power that dark spells provide. Wizards describe it as a sense of clarity, of supreme control over life and death. But this feeling is deceptive. Soon, that same magic begins to demand more. Simple curses lose their effect. The wizard begins to crave stronger incantations, longer exposure, deeper shadows. Like addiction, dark magic feeds on repetition. The more one uses it, the more it consumes. By the time the corruption becomes visible through the pallor of the skin, shifting of the voice, or the strange gleam in the eyes, it is already too late. The magic has rooted itself in the body. Quirrell's case shows this vividly. When he returned to Hogwarts, students noticed something unsettling about him. His stutter seemed forced, his movements uncertain, as though another presence were pulling his strings. His skin grew pale, his hands trembled, and there was always a faint scent of decay, as if the air around him was touched by something lifeless. The truth, as Harry later discovered, was horrific. Voldemort had fused himself to Quirrell's very body. The Dark Lord's parasitic spirit had found a host, and in doing so, erased what little remained of Quirrell's identity. "He is with me wherever I go," Quirrell admitted with a trembling voice. By then, he was no longer a man, but a shell animated by darkness. It is important to understand that Voldemort's possession of Quirrell was not a simple act of domination. It was the natural culmination of the infection that dark magic spreads. When one allows the dark arts into their soul, they open a door that cannot easily be closed. Voldemort merely stepped through the opening that Quirrell had created by his own ambition. Every spell he cast in Voldemort's service deepened the bond. His voice, once scholarly and soft, became hoarse. His gait slowed. In the end, his death was not only physical but spiritual. The body burned when Harry's touch destroyed the parasitic presence, leaving behind nothing but ashes. It was as though darkness, once denied its host, devoured what was left. Throughout magical history, this phenomenon has repeated itself in various forms. There were whispers of wizards who lost their reflection, of witches whose shadows moved independently. These are not fables, but symptoms of prolonged exposure to malevolent energy. Even Horcrux creation, perhaps the darkest of all acts, reflects this same principle. To tear one's soul, to imprison it in an object, requires immense will, but it also leaves the soul permanently wounded. Dumbledore once remarked, "Killing rips the soul apart." That tear manifests in the wizard's physical form. Voldemort's own face, pale and serpent-like, is the clearest proof of what happens when the dark arts consume their master. But the corruption is not always visible to the eye. It can take root in thought, in desire. Tom Riddle began as a brilliant boy, curious and ambitious. His magic was powerful, his mind sharp. Yet even in his youth, there were signs of something unnatural. When he first killed, the change was subtle, a stillness in his gaze, a cold satisfaction. With each subsequent act, the boundary between magic and morality thinned. The darkness became his companion, whispering to him through the wand, through the Horcruxes, through the very air he breathed. The transformation that followed was not the result of one spell, but of countless choices to embrace power over compassion. Dark magic, after all, thrives where love has withered. In modern times, the Department of Mysteries has conducted research on the phenomenon known as magical echo, a resonance left behind when powerful curses are cast repeatedly. Their findings confirm that repeated exposure alters a wizard's magical signature, making their aura unstable. This instability can lead to bursts of uncontrolled magic, hallucinations, or even possession. The same principle explains why Dementors are drawn to those who have long practiced dark sorcery. The energy emitted by corrupted magic is akin to despair, and the creatures feed upon it. In that sense, the use of the dark arts is a form of slow self-destruction, both magical and emotional. Even after the fall of Voldemort, traces of this corruption lingered in those who once served him. Some, like Draco Malfoy, managed to pull back before the infection spread too far. Others, such as Fenrir Greyback, embraced it fully, their humanity stripped away. Greyback, though technically a werewolf, exhibited all the signs of magical degradation, distorted features, heightened aggression, and an insatiable hunger for cruelty. His condition became a fusion of curse and choice, proving once again that darkness does not discriminate between types of magic. It consumes whatever it touches. The lesson hidden within these histories is not one of fear, but of understanding. Dark magic, by its nature, demands payment. Every curse draws from the wizard's essence. Every act of harm weaves another thread into the tapestry of corruption. When Snape used the killing curse against Dumbledore, he did so with purpose and pain. Yet even in that act, his eyes betrayed the horror of what such a spell demanded. He knew what it meant to let darkness touch his soul. His redemption lay not in denying the infection, but in choosing love and sacrifice over the emptiness that follows. Thus, the idea that dark spells can infect their caster is not mere superstition. It is a reflection of how magic mirrors the soul. The wand obeys the wizard, but the magic remembers the intent. The more that intent leans toward hatred, domination, or death, the more the wizard's essence bends toward shadow. And once that shadow takes hold, even the brightest light can struggle to find its way back. Number 22, some curses are invisible and slow. It was always said at Hogwarts that not all dark arts could be seen, heard, or even felt. Some of them were like whispers in the shadows, drifting through dreams, weaving themselves into the thoughts of their victims until the line between free will and manipulation blurred completely. Those who studied such spells, often in secrecy, far from the open classrooms of defense against the dark arts, knew that the most dangerous magic was not the one that killed instantly, but the one that lingered, unseen and unnoticed. The art of subtle enchantment, of invisible curses, had existed since the time of Salazar Slytherin himself. Slytherin, one of the four founders of Hogwarts, was rumoured to have been fascinated not by brute magical power, but by influence, control without detection. Unlike Godric Gryffindor, who wielded his sword openly, Slytherin preferred the silence of persuasion, the art of turning thought itself into a weapon. Some historians of magic whisper that Slytherin created early prototypes of mind-altering curses, enchantments that could weaken memory, distort ambition, or slowly bend the will of another wizard. These weren't the unforgivable curses known today, but something older and far more refined, spells that left no trace of their caster. There are stories of such enchantments surviving through the centuries. In one old manuscript attributed to a former Hogwarts librarian named Edric Vale, there is mention of a curse of forgetful purpose. It was said to cause its victim to gradually lose the memory of their greatest ambition. Wizards who once pursued noble causes, researchers, inventors, even aurors, would suddenly lose direction, abandoning their missions as though the fire within had simply burned out. The spell worked slowly, taking root in dreams. The afflicted might experience nights filled with restless visions, paths dissolving into fog, familiar faces turning away, names slipping from memory. By morning, their conviction would be slightly dimmer. In weeks, they would forget what had ever driven them forward. This, according to Vale, was not a curse of hate, but of domination. It was used by those who wished to weaken rivals without drawing attention. Unlike the Imperious Curse, which seized control in an instant and could be detected by skilled legilimens, the forgetful purpose enchantment infiltrated quietly, almost politely. It left behind no trace of dark residue, only confusion, exhaustion, and self-doubt. One could live a lifetime under such influence and never suspect another hand had guided the fall. It is no wonder, then, that Salazar Slytherin was both feared and revered. His understanding of human weakness surpassed even his knowledge of serpents. Many magical scholars believe that his true legacy lies not in the Chamber of Secrets or the basilisk that slept beneath it, but in the delicate network of incantations that shaped minds and hearts. Some of these ancient spells, though long forgotten, seem to echo in later magical phenomena. The Diary of Tom Riddle, for instance, operated on a similar principle: slow, psychological possession through interaction and trust. "I can be very persuasive," the diary once wrote to Ginny Weasley. And it was true. The young girl never realized that she was feeding her thoughts, her emotions, and eventually her soul into a vessel of darkness. When examined through the lens of magical history, Riddle's diary becomes more than a Horcrux. It becomes a direct descendant of Slytherin's philosophy. It didn't strike, it seeped. Its victim believed in friendship, comfort, and shared secrets, unaware that each word written upon the page drew her deeper into a magical snare. This was not brute force, it was invisible corruption. Ginny's experience shows that even in the modern age, the old art of undetectable dark enchantment survives, refined through centuries of cunning minds. "You'll find I can be very patient," wrote Riddle's voice from the diary, a chilling echo of that ancient subtlety. Such spells, those that grow within dreams or thoughts, are considered the hardest to counter. Even a skilled wizard like Albus Dumbledore once admitted, "It is the unknown we fear when we look upon death and darkness, nothing more." But the same truth applies to the living, to those under the influence of invisible magic. Fear grows from what cannot be seen or named. How can one defend against a spell that hides behind affection, ambition, or desire? A wizard might stand against a killing curse, but who could stand against their own weakening mind? There are examples beyond Slytherin's lineage. During the 17th century, the Black family was rumoured to have developed dream-binding hexes, spells woven into lullabies that made listeners see specific images in sleep. Over time, these dreams could alter memory, convincing the sleeper that certain events had never happened. In the Black family records, there is mention of a case where a rival wizard began to doubt his own innocence in a duel he had never fought. The charm was so gentle that no trace of curse energy was detected, even by the most powerful magical authorities. The victim eventually withdrew from public life, convinced he had committed an unforgivable act. Thus, his silence was achieved not through torture, but through confusion. It is often said that the darkest wizards are those who understand the human heart best. Such magic relies not on explosions of green light or bursts of flame, but on knowledge of how memory, fear, and longing intertwine. Even Lord Voldemort, for all his monstrous ambition, used fear and persuasion before violence. His very name became a spell, one so powerful that people avoided speaking it, granting him presence through absence. In this sense, the curse of silence around he who must not be named was itself a living enchantment, born from terror and belief. Yet there is something even more haunting in the thought that such magic may not always be intentional. Some enchanted objects, books, portraits, even enchanted jewelry, carry remnants of the emotions imprinted by their creators. A locket once owned by Salazar Slytherin, later turned into a Horcrux by Voldemort, seemed to draw out the wearer's deepest insecurities. Harry, Ron, and Hermione experienced its effects firsthand. "I don't know what's wrong with me," Ron confessed, after being consumed by jealousy and despair. But what he felt was not mere emotion. It was an echo of a spell designed to feed on weakness. The locket whispered doubts and twisted truths, much like the ancient mind curses once used in the old days of Hogwarts. The danger of these subtle enchantments lies in their ability to mimic reality. When a spell tells a victim, "You are not enough," the words sound like one's own thoughts. When nightmares repeat the same image, failure, loss, fear, they begin to reshape the waking mind. Scholars at the Department of Mysteries once speculated that some ancient wizards could implant recurring visions into others' dreams through nothing more than intent and emotional focus. This was the birth of what is now called empathic hexing, a rare and forbidden branch of the dark arts that manipulates emotion rather than flesh. Even Severus Snape, a master of defensive magic, understood the insidious power of thought. His own invention, Sectum Sempra, was brutally direct, yet his teaching methods revealed an understanding of psychological influence. "Occlumency," he told Harry, "is the art of closing one's mind." But why would a wizard need to close their mind unless there were spells meant to enter it? Snape's insistence on emotional control reflects the ancient fear that thoughts themselves can be doors, and when those doors are left open, the shadows slip in. One might imagine that such dark enchantments vanished with time, but traces of them remain scattered throughout wizarding culture. Some cursed objects in Borgin and Berks, for instance, are rumoured to carry passive spells that influence buyers. A man once purchased a mirror there, believing it made him look more confident. Within weeks he had grown vain, suspicious, and paranoid, his downfall complete. The shopkeeper reportedly claimed, "It shows what you wish to see and takes the rest." A simple phrase, yet terrifying in implication. How many minds have been quietly altered by similar relics, mistaken for harmless curiosities? The line between dark magic and human weakness is almost invisible. That is what makes these spells so enduring. They exploit not the body but the mind, the insecurities, fears, and desires every person carries. Perhaps that is why the founders of Hogwarts warned that not all darkness comes from hatred. Some comes from understanding. When knowledge becomes obsession, when influence becomes comfort, the shift towards shadow begins quietly, like a whisper in the night. In the end, it is this subtlety that defines the darkest of arts. The spells that destroy in silence, the enchantments that make victims complicit in their own undoing. These are the legacies of Slytherin's invisible hand. They require no wands raised in anger, no dramatic incantations shouted through corridors. Just patience, intent, and a deep understanding of the fragile human spirit. The old masters of magic knew a curse that can hide in plain sight is the most perfect kind of power. Number 23. Some family curses still remain active. In the shadowed corners of wizarding history, few subjects are as unsettling and as fascinating as the legacy of ancient family curses. These enchantments, woven centuries ago through rituals of blood and hatred, have outlasted empires and outlived their creators. They are whispered about in the halls of Hogwarts and studied with both fear and fascination inside the Department of Mysteries. Unlike simple hexes or jinxes, these curses are embedded in bloodlines handed down from generation to generation like a dark inheritance. The curse becomes not just a spell, but a part of one's very being, an invisible thread that binds destiny to the will of the caster long after the original wand has turned to dust. One of the most chilling examples in wizarding history is the curse of the Gaunt family, descendants of Salazar Slytherin himself. Proud of their pure blood heritage, the Gaunts clung to it with obsessive ferocity. Their arrogance, mixed with the dangerous power of their ancestors' magic, ultimately led to their ruin. As described in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, Marvolo Gaunt's shack was a place of misery and madness. The family's bloodline, once noble, had become corrupted. The obsession with blood purity became a curse in itself, a psychological and magical decay. "He's proud, that one," Dumbledore once remarked. Proud and mad, a lethal combination. Scholars of dark magic often cite the Gaunt line as a classic case of a self-inflicted curse. The family's hatred and isolation fueled their downfall. But beyond madness and misfortune lies something even darker, what researchers in the Department of Mysteries call a magical echo. These echoes are remnants of the original curse, fragments of spellwork that remain active through generations. It is believed that Morfin Gaunt, who spoke Parseltongue and lived in a constant state of delusion, was as much a victim of this echo as he was of his own upbringing. His violent tendencies were not merely personal flaws, but symptoms of a curse woven into the family's essence. When Lord Voldemort was born, a direct descendant, many believed the culmination of the curse had arrived. The Gaunt blood had finally produced a wizard capable of embodying the darkness their lineage had long carried. In the archives of the Department of Mysteries there are records, some sealed under magical oath, describing similar ancestral curses. One of the most studied is the so-called Curse of Thornavale, tied to an ancient Scottish family that disappeared in the 17th century. The Thorns were once famed alchemists, experimenting with the transmutation of human emotions into magical power. Their matriarch, Lady Isolde Thorne, is said to have bound her descendants to eternal ambition. Every Thorn born thereafter was cursed to desire greatness above all else, often at the cost of their sanity or lives. One record tells of a Thorn heir who, after years of failed experimentation, vanished in a blaze of cursed fire. It is said that the family's mansion still burns in magical flame, visible only under the full moon. The principles of these dark enchantments are rooted in what ancient magicians called magia sanguinis, blood magic. Such magic is powerful precisely because it intertwines with life itself. When a curse is bound through blood, it cannot be erased by ordinary counterspells or charms. It flows with the heartbeat and hides in the very marrow of one's bones. Some magical theorists, such as Professor Eleanora Greengrass, argue that blood curses alter not just one's destiny, but the very fabric of a family's collective soul. To break a blood curse, she wrote in her essay, Shadows of Heredity, is to break time itself, for blood remembers. Even the greatest wizards have failed in their attempts to undo such magic completely. There are tales of auras and healers who ventured into ancient ruins, armed with runes of purification, only to emerge haunted or cursed themselves. The magic resists interference, as though it possesses a will of its own. Dumbledore himself once admitted, "There are enchantments older than Hogwarts, older even than magic as we know it. Some wounds of the soul cannot be mended by wand or will." These words, spoken after the Second Wizarding War, are often interpreted as an acknowledgement that some of the world's curses remain alive and active, undisturbed relics of an age when wizards dabbled in forces beyond comprehension. It is said that the Department of Mysteries keeps certain artifacts sealed within the Hall of Lost Legacies, items too dangerous to be studied openly. Among them is rumoured to be a silver ring etched with a serpent and cracked along its edge. Many believe it to be the last remnant of the Gaunt Curse, the same ring that bore Voldemort's Horcrux. Though the Horcrux was destroyed, some researchers suspect that traces of its ancient enchantments remain. "You can destroy a vessel," said an unnamed unspeakable in a confidential interview, but not always the echo of what it contained. Across wizarding Europe, similar stories persist. In the mountains of Transylvania, there are whispered accounts of the Draculesti line, a family cursed to be watched by shadows. Generations of Draculestis died young, their deaths often unexplained. Local lore holds that the curse began when one of their ancestors betrayed a dark coven and sealed their leader within a mirror. Every few decades, the mirror is said to reappear, and the next heir dies within the year. Scholars debate the veracity of such claims, but even the ministry has issued travel warnings to the region, labelling it a site of residual dark magic. Not all family curses are visible or deadly. Some take subtler forms like perpetual misfortune or emotional torment. The Montmorency family, once among the brightest minds in potion-making, was said to suffer from a curse of confusion. Their descendants could never recall their greatest discoveries. Recipes vanished from memory, ideas dissolved, and the family fortune crumbled into dust. Ironically, one of their most famous descendants, Laverne de Montmorency, invented the love potion that now bears her name, a creation born perhaps from the same chaos that plagued her bloodline. The persistence of these curses raises profound questions about morality and responsibility in the wizarding world. Can a family truly be blamed for the sins of its ancestors? If one is born under a curse, is one destined to suffer, or can free will triumph over inherited darkness? Harry Potter's own life offers a striking reflection of this dilemma. Though not bound by a family curse in the traditional sense, he carried the echo of Voldemort's magic within him, a living fragment of another's will. His story, in many ways, demonstrates that while dark magic may be inherited, the choice to resist it is one's own. "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are," Dumbledore once told him, "far more than our abilities." For all the fear they inspire, family curses also reveal the remarkable resilience of the human and magical spirit. Some families have spent centuries seeking redemption through acts of courage or kindness. The Burke family of Knockturn Alley, once notorious for trafficking in cursed artifacts, reportedly founded a secret order dedicated to dismantling old dark magic. Their descendants claim to have neutralized several lesser curses using newly developed runic transfiguration methods. Whether this is truth or convenient legend remains uncertain, but the idea persists that darkness, no matter how ancient, can be challenged. Research into blood curses continues in secret. The Department of Mysteries remains tight-lipped, but hints have surfaced of a project known as the Erythros Codex, a compendium of cursed genealogies. The codex reportedly maps bloodlines still tainted by dark enchantments, tracing them through centuries of wizarding history. The goal, insiders claim, is not eradication, but understanding, an acknowledgement that one cannot destroy what one does not first comprehend. The existence of such a project suggests that some of the greatest minds in magic still wrestle with the legacies of their forebears. And yet there are those who believe some curses should remain untouched. Ancient magic, they argue, is part of the balance of the world, light and dark intertwined. To erase all traces of darkness might undo the very fabric of magical reality. Every spell leaves a shadow, wrote Bathilda Bagshot in her History of Magic, and shadows, though feared, are proof that the light still burns. This view, controversial as it is, reminds us that even in the darkest curses there lies a story, a warning from the past, a mirror to the dangers of human pride and power. As night falls over the wizarding world, somewhere deep beneath the ministry, unspeakable minds still search for answers. They pore over dusty scrolls and shattered relics, tracing the fingerprints of long-dead sorcerers. Each discovery, each flicker of insight, carries both hope and peril. For to understand a family curse is to stare directly into the heart of ancient evil, and to realize that some echoes never fade. The magic that began in blood still runs through veins today, invisible but alive, reminding every witch and wizard that the past is never truly gone. It breathes beneath the surface of every spell, waiting to be remembered or repeated. Number 24. Dark potions are as dangerous as spells. Dark magic in the wizarding world has always been cloaked in mystery, fear, and allure. While most people imagine curses and hexes when they hear the phrase dark arts, the truth runs deeper and far more insidious. Potions, those seemingly harmless concoctions simmering in cauldrons, have long been underestimated. Their danger lies not in their flashiness, but in their subtlety. A well-brewed potion can twist the mind, corrupt the spirit, or trap a person in a fate worse than death. As Professor Snape once said with quiet intensity, there will be no foolish wand-waving or silly incantations in this class. As such, I don't expect many of you to appreciate the subtle science and exact art that is potion-making. Few understood, however, how dark that art could truly become. In the dungeons of Hogwarts, the flickering torchlight often danced upon Snape's face as he leaned over simmering cauldrons. His movements were methodical, deliberate, almost reverent. To his students he appeared cold and unfeeling, but behind those calculating eyes was a mind that understood the raw power of ingredients, power capable of both healing and destruction. When he taught about draught, of living death, or veritaserum, he rarely mentioned the darker variations, those that could destroy rather than reveal, enslave rather than enlighten. Yet Snape knew them all. Some of those formulas were not written in any book. They existed only in his memory, guarded secrets from his years as a Death Eater and his even longer years as a man living between two worlds. Among the whispered tales that circulated through the castle, there was one potion that even the bravest students hesitated to name aloud, the Soulbreaker Draught. Rumor had it that Snape had created it during his early years as a spy for Dumbledore, a potion that could separate the mind from the soul without killing the body. Those who drank it would remain alive but hollow, their eyes vacant, their voice an echo of something once human. It was said that Snape brewed it only once, in secret, and never again. Some believed it was an experiment born from guilt, a reflection of his desire to understand the nature of remorse and the possibility of redemption. The power of such a potion would rival even the unforgivable curses, unlike the Cruciatus curse, which inflicted unbearable pain, or the Imperious curse, which enslaved the will. The Soulbreaker Draught worked quietly and permanently. Its victim might appear unharmed, even serene, but their essence, that spark of humanity, would fade each day, leaving only an empty vessel. It was dark magic in liquid form, and unlike a curse, there was no counterspell, no reversal charm. Only the brewer could have known how to stop its effects. And Snape, if he truly made it, took that knowledge to the grave. The concept of destroying a soul without killing the body haunted many of those who later studied Snape's notes. When Harry Potter eventually inherited the Half-Blood Prince's old potions textbook, he discovered margin scribbles that hinted at something more sinister than mere classroom improvements. The elegant handwriting beside certain potion recipes, small additions like counter with asphodel root or increase wormwood for lasting effect, suggested a mind that had spent years perfecting not just useful concoctions, but potions that could alter the very foundation of being. Harry had used one of these notes to brew a flawless draught of living death, but even he felt an unease, as if touching something sacred and forbidden. What makes dark potions more terrifying than curses is their silence. A curse can be seen, felt, even fought off. A potion once ingested is part of you. It seeps into your veins, it merges with your breath. There is no wand to block it, no shield to reflect it. The transformation begins slowly, imperceptibly. First, the victim loses their ability to dream, then emotion dulls, and eventually even memories fade. The body remains walking and breathing, but the person inside is gone. Such was the whispered fate of an unnamed Death Eater, captured and interrogated after the First Wizarding War. A man who, according to Aura reports, spoke only in riddles and shadows, his eyes like glass. Snape's knowledge of such things came not from curiosity, but from survival. He had lived among those who saw potions as tools of dominance, like Antonin Dolohov, who once experimented with poisons so subtle they mimicked natural death. The Death Eaters, for all their devotion to curses, often underestimated potion brewers. Voldemort, however, did not. He respected the power of alchemy. He sought the Philosopher's Stone not only for immortality but for control, the ability to manipulate life itself. In this regard, potion-making was the purest expression of domination over nature. There is no good or evil, only power, Voldemort had once said. In the world of potions, that statement took on a chilling truth. One of the most disturbing examples of dark potion use came during the final years of the First Wizarding War, when several members of the Order of the Phoenix mysteriously fell ill. Their bodies weakened, their minds slipped into confusion, and healers at St. Mungo's could not explain it. It was only later, when Snape defected to Dumbledore's side, that he recognized the symptoms. They matched those caused by a potion known as the Draught of Decay. Its ingredients included powdered mandrake root and essence of basilisk venom, an impossible combination that could only have been brewed by someone with an intimate knowledge of both potion craft and cruelty. Snape helped to counteract it, though several victims never fully recovered. That act, perhaps more than any other, convinced Dumbledore of Snape's loyalty. Even benign-looking potions could be twisted into something sinister. Amatentia, the world's most powerful love potion, shimmered with its signature pearly glow, yet in the wrong hands it became a weapon of enslavement. To force love is to destroy will, a concept Snape despised, perhaps because he understood it too well. The thin line between love and obsession, loyalty and control, fascinated him. It is no coincidence that his own life mirrored the paradox of potion-making. The same ingredients that could heal could also harm. For those select few who possess the predisposition, Snape once noted in his personal annotations, potions can do what spells cannot. They can command the heart. The Ministry of Magic has long regulated potion ingredients, but even they admit that certain brews defy classification. Some mixtures, such as the elixir of eternal vigilance, blur the line between brilliance and madness. Its drinker gains unparalleled alertness, but at the cost of sleep and sanity. Others, like the Silent Death, leave no trace at all, killing without pain or evidence. These potions, often traded on the black market, originate from recipes whispered through generations of rogue brewers. Many such brews can be traced back to the same source, ancient texts hidden deep within the restricted section of the Hogwarts library, where only a few professors ever dared to look. Snape's genius lay not only in his mastery of brewing, but in his understanding of restraint. He knew that knowledge itself could corrupt. He once remarked to a stunned Hermione Granger that some knowledge is better left unlearned. Yet his curiosity was boundless. He studied old manuscripts rumoured to come from Salazar Slytherin's private collection, texts that described the process of binding one's life force into a potion to prolong existence. The ritual required both precision and cruelty. One mistake could destroy the soul entirely. It was alchemy in its most perverse form, and Snape, though fascinated, never dared attempt it. When Harry looked back on Snape's life after the war, he realized that the man's true battle had never been with others, but with himself. Snape's mastery over dark potions symbolized his lifelong struggle, a desire to understand evil without succumbing to it. In the quiet solitude of his dungeon, surrounded by shelves of bottled shadows and glittering vials, he stood at the crossroads of creation and destruction. Each potion he brewed was a test of will, a reflection of his inner duality. He could have been another Voldemort, yet he chose to be something else, a guardian of knowledge, too dangerous to trust to anyone else. Dark potions, unlike spells, are permanent reminders of consequence. They reveal the cost of obsession, the fragility of the human soul. They remind wizards that power, once unleashed, cannot always be contained. When Snape finally met his end, many believed that the Dungeon Master's greatest secrets died with him, but others whispered that somewhere in the hidden chambers of Hogwarts, locked behind unbreakable charms, rests a small vial of silver-blue liquid, the last remnant of the Soulbreaker draught. It glows faintly in the dark, as if alive, waiting for someone foolish enough to uncork it. And so, the legend of the dark potions endures, a silent echo of the truth that power need not shout to be feared. The cauldron, not the wand, may yet prove the deadliest weapon in the wizarding world. For in the stillness of potion-making lies the most dangerous temptation of all, to play not with magic, but with the essence of life itself. Number 25. Portraits can carry dark enchantments. There is a strange kind of silence that falls over the castle when the portraits whisper. Even those who have spent years at Hogwarts sometimes pause on the dim staircases, uncertain whether the faint murmurs come from the wind or from the painted eyes following them in the dark. Magical portraits, as most students know, are not ordinary works of art. They retain traces of the personality, speech, and sometimes even the magic of the person depicted. In most cases, they are harmless, serving as guardians of memory and communication between the living and the long dead. Yet there are tales whispered among the portraits themselves, tales that speak of darker enchantments, of canvases where the paint is mixed not only with pigment, but with something far more dangerous. Every wizard portrait begins as an imitation of life, but in certain hands that imitation can become a prison. When a dark wizard paints with intent, when he wishes not to immortalize but to control, he may use cursed ink or blood-infused pigment. Ancient magical theory suggests that the artist can tether a fragment of his soul to the painting, creating a faint echo of consciousness. It is not a Horcrux in the traditional sense, yet it carries the same shadow of corruption. According to an old rumour once shared among the portraits of Hogwarts, there was a time in the 17th century when a certain Salazar Slytherin experiment went terribly wrong. He attempted, it is said, to trap his own likeness within a portrait to preserve his wisdom for future generations. But the result was not wisdom, it was will. The painting refused to stay silent, whispering to young students who passed, trying to guide them toward purity and secrecy. Even centuries later, the magic of such works can linger. When the castle was expanded, the cursed likeness of Slytherin was said to have been hidden deep within a sealed chamber. The real Chamber of Secrets was not the only one built by the founder, or so claimed the keepers of Hogwarts' oldest tales. Professor Phineas Nigellus Black, whose own portrait travels between Grimmauld Place and the headmaster's office, once muttered, "Some portraits remember more than they should." It was one of his rare moments of unease. He, unlike most, understood the power that can dwell in pigment. The danger of cursed portraits lies not in their movement or speech, but in their subtlety. They do not attack, they influence. A portrait steeped in dark magic can manipulate emotions, amplify fear, or sow doubt in the viewer's mind. Imagine a young student walking the corridor late at night, pausing before a painting that seems to look straight into his soul. The painted figure leans forward, lips unmoving yet whispering directly into his thoughts. The student feels an irrational urge, an impulse to disobey, to explore, to act. This is how corruption begins, quietly and invisibly. Even Dumbledore, a master of subtle magic, once said that thoughts are the easiest to poison when wrapped in flattery. There was one portrait, long forgotten in the east wing of the castle, that demonstrated this danger. The painting depicted a woman in emerald robes, Lady Elidora Marchbanks, an artist and enchantress who lived in the 15th century. Her portrait was originally hung in the library, a gift from her descendants. For decades it appeared harmless. But when a series of strange incidents began to occur, students claiming to hear whispers urging them to find the truth beneath the stone, the staff grew concerned. One night, the caretaker discovered the portrait glowing faintly, the paint moving like liquid. When Professor Dippet examined it, he found traces of an ancient curse, one used by practitioners of the dark arts to preserve will beyond death. The painting was sealed away, and the frame burned. Yet, as rumour has it, sometimes in the library, a faint green shimmer still flickers on the wall where Lady Elidora once hung. It is worth remembering that portraits in Hogwarts are given a degree of awareness through the use of complex charms. These enchantments capture not only the image, but also the essence of the person, memories, habits, even fragments of thought. Usually these fragments are harmless as they depend on the real individual's character, but if the subject was already dark, the resulting portrait could act as a vessel for lingering malice. Consider the portrait of Phineas Nigellus again, clever, sardonic, loyal in his own cold way. Had he been a follower of the dark arts, his likeness might have become far more dangerous. Indeed, during the Second Wizarding War, even his loyalty was tested when he carried messages between Hogwarts and Grimmauld Place. His disdain for certain students revealed how easily portraits could become conduits of influence. The Ministry of Magic has long maintained a department tasked with inspecting magical artifacts, including bewitched portraits. The Department of Magical Artifacts in the mid-19th century introduced the so-called Silencio ink test. If a portrait reacts to the incantation Silencio Totalis by vibrating or muttering, it may harbour enchantments of emotional or psychic resonance, an early warning of dark influence. Yet even these tests are not perfect. A truly skilled dark artist could conceal the curse beneath layers of neutral spellwork. A painting might appear benign for decades before revealing its true nature. In private collections, the risk is greater still. Families, such as the Blacks and the Malfoys, whose lineage spans centuries of dark magic, were known to preserve ancestral portraits that advised their descendants. Some claimed that the portrait of Arcturus Black once ordered a duel to defend the family's honor, and the young heir obeyed. The duel ended in death. These were not mere stories. The influence of such portraits on their owners was profound, shaping generations through whispers of pride and vengeance. To understand how dark magic can intertwine with painted art, one must remember that emotion is the raw material of enchantment. When a portrait is created with love or respect, it becomes a comfort to those who view it. But when painted with hatred, fear, or obsession, it absorbs that same darkness. In one of the rare texts of the restricted section, Ars Umbrae, the Art of Shadows, an anonymous author describes a ritual known as vinculum picturae, a binding between the soul and its image. The brush becomes the wand, the text warns, and the stroke becomes the curse. There is a haunting example of this in the story of the painter Marius Caro, a distant relative of the notorious Caro twins. Marius was a recluse who painted portraits for the ministry before descending into madness. He believed he could capture not just likeness, but conscience. His final work, The Silent Advisor, was discovered decades later in the ruins of his cottage. Those who looked upon it reported an overpowering sense of guilt and dread. The painting was locked away in the Department of Mysteries, where, according to some unspeakables, it still watches visitors with eyes that seem to follow them even through closed doors. The concept of the portrait as a vessel for the self recalls another ancient warning from Dumbledore's own words. "Do not pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living, and above all, those who live without love." Love, or the absence of it, determines the kind of magic that endures. A portrait born of love preserves memory. One born of fear preserves malice. In this sense, a cursed painting is a mirror, not of beauty, but of the soul's decay. Within Hogwarts, the enchantments surrounding portrait creation have grown increasingly strict. Every new portrait is tested by a team of charms experts who perform what they call a purity circle, a barrier of light magic designed to expose traces of the dark arts. If the painting resists or flickers in shadow, it is destroyed before completion. Even so, the older portraits, those created before these measures, remain a concern. Some whisper that the castle itself protects them, choosing when to let their voices be heard. There is an unsettling connection between portraits and ghosts. Both are remnants of the living, but ghosts exist independently while portraits depend on interaction. Yet when the magic within a portrait grows too strong, it can mimic the behavior of a ghost, haunting corridors, shifting locations without magical permission. This was reported once by Argus Filch, who swore that a portrait of a hooded man appeared in the Great Hall one night, though none had seen it there before. When he returned with Professor McGonagall, it was gone. The line between memory and malice, between preservation and possession, is thin. The wizarding world accepts portraits as companions and advisors, but few dare to consider the cost of such immortality. To preserve a mind is to trap it. To trap it is to risk corruption. For every kindly portrait like that of the fat lady or Sir Cadogan, who guard and guide with humour or courage, there may exist one that watches in silence, waiting for the night to fall. Perhaps that is why Hogwarts never sleeps entirely. The castle breathes through its portraits, the painted eyes that never blink, the smiles that never fade. They hold within them fragments of history, but also fragments of hunger. As one old caretaker once said, The walls here remember everything, some things they wish they could forget. And perhaps, beneath the laughter of painted knights and the gossip of headmasters, something darker still listens, hidden behind centuries of varnish and charm. Number 26. Dark books can influence the reader. In the world of magic, knowledge itself can be a weapon, and few things illustrate this better than the sinister realm of the dark arts. Among the many ways darkness finds its path into a wizard's soul, none are as quietly dangerous as the books that whisper it. While wands can be disarmed and curses countered, a book, once opened, speaks directly to the mind. Its words do not shout, they seduce. They promise understanding, mastery, even immortality. Yet behind the ink and parchment, there is often something alive, a will that watches the reader, waiting for weakness. In the shadowed corners of magical history, there have always been volumes that read the wizard as much as they are read by him. The power of such books lies in their creation. Ancient dark wizards did not merely write with ink, they infused their pages with enchantments drawn from forbidden rituals. Their intention was not only to preserve knowledge, but to ensure their influence would never fade. When the words of Salazar Slytherin or Herpo the Foul were inscribed, they carried fragments of their creator's spirit. Over time, those fragments grew restless. The magic of the written word became a vessel for the author's soul, corrupt, cunning, and patient. To touch such a book is to open oneself to the very consciousness of its maker. Take, for example, the tattered copy of advanced potion-making that Harry Potter once found hidden in a dusty cupboard of the Half-Blood Prince. The book bore the marks of its previous owner, notes, corrections, and spells never taught at Hogwarts. Among them, one spell stood out, Sectum Sempra, for enemies. When Harry cast it against Draco Malfoy, the result was horrific. Deep gashes appeared as though inflicted by invisible blades. It was only afterward that Harry realized the book was not simply a guide, but a reflection of its owner's mind. The Half-Blood Prince, known later as Severus Snape, had poured into those pages his brilliance, his rage, and his pain. As Dumbledore once said, words are, in my not-so-humble opinion, our most inexhaustible source of magic, capable of both inflicting injury and remedying it. The prince's book had done both. But what if such enchantments were intentional? What if the mind of the author was deliberately bound within the parchment? It is said that centuries before Hogwarts was founded, wizards of the Dark Ages experimented with soul writing, a technique where the ink was mixed with one's own blood and the page bound with a fragment of spirit. The result was a living text, capable of whispering to its reader. Some claimed these books could move on their own, opening at the right page as if eager to be read. Others reported hearing faint murmurs in the dead of night, voices that did not belong to the living. In the restricted section of the Hogwarts library, Madame Pince guards several such tomes under enchantments that even senior professors hesitate to break. One of them, Magia Malevola, was reportedly penned by Cassius Marvolo, a dark scholar of the 15th century who sought to understand pain as a magical energy. Those who dared to study it found the book strangely persuasive. Its parchment smelled faintly of iron, and its letters shimmered with a pulse as though the ink itself were alive. More than one reader described a strange compulsion, an urge to keep reading even as the letters began to shift before their eyes. One apprentice in the 1700s reportedly vanished after reading its final chapter, leaving behind only a quill and a smear of blood. The effect of these books varies, but the pattern is always the same: fascination, obsession, and ultimately loss. There are accounts of students who spent nights in the restricted section, whispering spells from forbidden texts until their eyes turned black from lack of sleep. Some began to speak in tongues, repeating words that had not been heard for centuries. In the most extreme cases, the books themselves appeared to resist being closed, their pages trembling as if protesting abandonment. Knowledge, as Dumbledore once reminded Harry, is a terrible thing when misused. Power tempts the purest of hearts. Those books are the pure embodiment of that warning. Not all cursed texts are ancient. During Voldemort's rise, several of his followers attempted to imitate the practices of early soul writers. Lucius Malfoy was rumoured to have possessed a collection of dark manuscripts that once belonged to Morgana du Coeur Noir, a witch obsessed with binding her consciousness into ink. When Aurors raided Malfoy Manor after the first fall of Voldemort, they found a single surviving volume sealed in silver. The Ministry never disclosed what it contained, but the unspeakables in the Department of Mysteries claimed that the book occasionally shifted its shape, as if breathing. One night, it was said, a guard fell asleep near it and awoke screaming, unable to remember his own name. There is a peculiar irony in the fact that the wizards who wrote such books sought immortality and, in a sense, achieved it. Their minds live on in sentences that outlasted their bodies, twisting through the centuries like shadows on the wall. The true danger of these tomes lies not in their curses but in their seduction. They offer forbidden wisdom, the kind that promises control over death, over others, even over fate. Yet, as every dark wizard eventually learns, power without restraint consumes. The reader becomes the vessel, the ink becomes blood, the words carve themselves into memory until the book no longer needs to be opened. It speaks from within. Imagine then a place where all such books were gathered, a library built by those who believed knowledge, no matter how dark, must be preserved. Wizards have whispered for centuries about the Bibliotheca Tenebris, a hidden collection said to contain the most dangerous magical writings ever created. Its existence has never been confirmed, yet its legend persists. Some say it was founded by the last of the unspeakables, who refused to destroy what they could not understand. Others believe it lies beneath Nurmengard, sealed by Dumbledore himself after Grindelwald's defeat. In that library, they say, the books do not wait to be opened, they choose. The idea that books can choose their readers may sound fanciful, but in magic, intention matters as much as spell work. Tom Riddle's diary is perhaps the most chilling example. On the surface, it was an innocent-looking journal, but in truth, it was a fragment of Voldemort's soul, a Horcrux disguised as paper. When Ginny Weasley confided in it, the diary responded with warmth and understanding. It drew her deeper, feeding on her emotions until it possessed her entirely. The diary did not merely influence her mind, it replaced her will. The pattern was the same as in all cursed books: fascination, dependence, and erasure of self. In its final moments, when Harry pierced it with the basilisk fang, black ink erupted like blood, the soul of its author screaming as it was destroyed. It is not difficult to imagine what might happen if hundreds of such books existed, each one containing the remnants of ancient malice. Wizards might stumble upon one and find themselves haunted by dreams not their own. A page could burn the fingertips of an unworthy reader or sing sweetly to one who bears a trace of darkness in his heart. These are not metaphors in the magical world. They are realities wrapped in parchment. That is why even the most liberal of professors insist that students never underestimate the power of a book that wants to be read. The mind of a wizard is a delicate thing. Spells can alter thought, potions can twist emotion, But books change the reader slowly. They convince him he is learning when in truth he is being rewritten. Some who studied dark tomes claim to see visions, faces emerging from ink, whispers between lines. A Ravenclaw scholar once wrote that her book began completing her thoughts. At first it was exhilarating, she confessed in her final note. Now, I cannot tell which words are mine. When her colleagues found her, her quill was still moving, though her hand had long turned cold. There is a strange beauty to the idea that knowledge is alive, even when it is corrupt. Perhaps that is why wizards continue to seek forbidden texts despite knowing the risks. Curiosity is the first step toward danger, and in the magical world, curiosity has teeth. Yet the books themselves are patient. They do not chase, they wait. They whisper from the shadows of vaults, from dusty corners of forgotten shelves. They remember the warmth of human touch, the hunger of eyes that dared to read. And somewhere, if the rumors are true, in a place no one dares name aloud, there stands a library that breathes. Its doors are sealed, not by locks, but by silence. Within, books murmur in languages older than Hogwarts itself. The air hums with enchantment and despair. Those who enter rarely return, and those who do are never the same. For in that place, it is said, every book searches for its reader, the one whose soul resonates with its authors. When it finds them, the pact is sealed. The pages open by themselves, the words rise like smoke, and the darkness begins to read back. Number 27. Darkness can enter dreams. Harry Potter's connection to the Dark Lord was more than a mark upon his forehead. It was a window through which the shadows crept. In the stillness of the night, when Hogwarts slept under its ancient enchantments, the boundary between dream and reality blurred for Harry. Voldemort had found a way to pierce that fragile veil. Through their shared bond, the curse that had failed to kill the boy, he sent visions, whispers, and false memories. What began as flickers of pain in Harry's scar became long, vivid dreams of serpents slithering through corridors and eyes that gleamed red in the dark. The Dark Lord had learned to use the mind as a battlefield, and the dreamscape was his most insidious weapon. The art of invading another's sleep was no accident of connection. In the oldest grimoires of dark magic, wizards once spoke of noctem artis, the night arts, a branch of sorcery long forbidden even among the dark arts. These were spells that did not harm the flesh, but broke the mind from within. It was said that Salazar Slytherin himself in his youth had experimented with such enchantments. Some historians believed he used dreams to test the loyalty of his followers, planting visions of serpents and chambers beneath the earth. Though the details of those spells were lost with time, their influence lingered in fragments, in cursed lullabies, in potions brewed from poppy tears, and in enchanted objects that hummed softly while their victims slept. Voldemort's mastery of mental invasion was a modern echo of those ancient arts. When Harry dreamed of Mr. Weasley's attack by the serpent Nagini, he was not simply having a nightmare. The Dark Lord had, in that moment, used their mental link to show Harry what was happening elsewhere. "He's got Arthur Weasley," Harry gasped upon waking, shaken and pale. The dream had crossed into reality. What Voldemort had achieved was something even among dark wizards considered nearly impossible, a projection of will across distance, merging one consciousness into another. Through the dream, Harry had seen through the snake's eyes. The nightmare had become a conduit. Such practices are known in the study of forbidden magic as somnus imperio, the domination of the sleeping mind. Victims of this enchantment often suffer the same symptoms that Harry described: exhaustion, recurring visions, and difficulty distinguishing memory from illusion. In extreme cases, wizards have fallen into trances lasting weeks, lost within crafted dream worlds where their tormentors control every sensation. St. Mungo's Hospital once recorded the case of a ministry official, Edgar Greymantle, who slept for 40 days after handling a cursed diary. He awoke convinced he had lived another life entirely, one designed by the wizard who cast the charm. Severus Snape, who understood these dangers better than anyone, warned Harry that Voldemort's influence was growing stronger precisely because Harry's mind was open. Occlumency, which the art of shielding the mind, became the boy's reluctant salvation. Yet Harry resisted, frustrated by Snape's harshness. During those lessons, Snape's cold voice echoed like a spell itself. Control your emotions. Discipline your mind. The irony was cruel. The same man who despised Harry was also his only defense against the invasion of his dreams. Occlumency demanded not just focus, but the suppression of feeling. For a boy like Harry, who thrived on emotion, that was nearly impossible. The connection between dark dreams and emotional manipulation is a recurring theme in the history of magic. The more fear or anger a person harbors, the easier it is for a dark wizard to reach them. Voldemort understood this instinctively. His fragments of soul, the Horcruxes, carried that same power. When Harry wore the locket of Slytherin, his sleep turned restless, filled with whispers and visions of failure. The locket magnified despair, feeding on it. It was another form of nocturnal invasion, not through spells, but through the parasitic nature of dark magic itself. In the restricted section of the Hogwarts library, the ancient tome Somniorum Tenebris describes how dream manipulation was once used for interrogation. The victim would be forced to relive their greatest fears until their mind broke. The caster would then extract confessions from the dreamscape as though pulling them from a pensieve. Though the book was banned centuries ago, fragments of its text survived, warning that repeated exposure could erode the boundary between dream and waking life. Beware the whisper that does not end with dawn, it reads, for the dream that continues past sunrise is no longer yours. The scars left by such enchantments can be more damaging than curses upon the body. Harry often woke drenched in sweat, his scar burning as though a brand of fire had been pressed upon it. The dream would fade, but its emotional residue lingered. Dread, confusion, anger. Albus Dumbledore later admitted that he had feared this connection from the beginning. He called it a dangerous channel, a two-way link. For as much as Voldemort could see into Harry's mind, Harry could also see into his. The danger lay in curiosity. The Dark Lord's mind was a labyrinth filled with traps, and to wander there was to invite corruption. One cannot ignore that dreams have always held power in the wizarding world. The art of divination practiced by seers like Sybil Trelawney depends on visions that come in sleep. Yet the difference between prophecy and nightmare lies in intent. Prophecy is given, nightmares are imposed. Dark wizards twist the natural bridge between consciousness and the unconscious, forcing their will upon the mind. Voldemort, through his obsession with control, blurred that moral boundary completely. To him, every mind was a door, and every door could be opened. There were whispers among the unspeakables in the Department of Mysteries about an experiment known as Somnus Lux, the Dreamlight, an attempt to reverse the effects of nocturnal curses. They believed it might be possible to cleanse the mind by projecting a counter-frequency of thought, something akin to occlumency made permanent. Records suggest that the experiment failed catastrophically, The subject's consciousness disintegrated, leaving the body alive but empty. The ministry banned any further research into dream manipulation, categorizing it under Level 5 dark arts, along with Horcrux creation and the Imperious Curse. Dreams have always fascinated wizards because they reveal what even magic cannot fully control: the self. That is why the dark arts seek to poison them. The moment Voldemort entered Harry's dreams, he had already won half the battle. He made the boy doubt his own mind. It was this erosion of certainty that Dumbledore most feared. "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities," he once said. Yet when the line between choice and influence blurs, when even thoughts are not one's own, how can choice survive? The most haunting aspect of nocturnal dark magic is its quiet persistence. A wound may heal, but a nightmare returns. Harry's connection to Voldemort faded only after the final battle, when the last Horcrux was destroyed. Yet traces of those dreams remained. In moments of stress, the memory of that serpentine corridor would flash before his eyes. Even years later, he would wake, suddenly, convinced he had heard that cold, high voice whisper his name again. It is the curse of those who have faced the dark arts. Victory never quite feels like freedom. What Voldemort did through dreams was not simply cruelty. It was strategy. By manipulating Harry's emotions, he lured him to the Department of Mysteries. The dream of Sirius's suffering was the perfect trap. Voldemort had crafted it carefully, knowing that Harry's compassion was both his strength and weakness. It was not a spell in the traditional sense, but an orchestration of fear and love. The night arts teach that the most effective nightmares are not born of horror, but of hope. Hope turned against the dreamer. In the years that followed the war, the Department of Magical Law Enforcement quietly began to train select Aurors in occlumency. Kingsley Shacklebolt, now Minister for Magic, authorized a new program known as the Somnus Protocol. Its purpose was simple: ensure that no wizard or witch could ever again be enslaved through dreams. Harry Potter, despite his reluctance, became a consultant for the program. He shared his experiences, describing in painful detail how it felt to lose control of one's own mind. His testimony remains one of the few modern records of nocturnal possession. Perhaps that is why the study of occlumency has gained new respect in the post-war era. What was once viewed as a rare and difficult art is now considered essential defense. For as long as magic exists, there will be those who use it to dominate. And as long as the mind can dream, the battle for its freedom will never truly end. The dark arts are not only spells cast by wand or word, they are ideas slipping silently into the places we are most vulnerable. Darkness, after all, needs no door, only the moment when the dreamer forgets to guard their sleep.